How to network without going to networking events. That's the topic of today's webinar. I'm Lee Rosen. I am joined by Ned Days, who is assisting me with the technical pieces of this program. Let's get started. Hello from Madrid. That's where I am today. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I'm really glad you joined us. I'm excited about this program because I love this topic. I love the idea of building more relationships and friendships. And I have some ideas about how you can make this work better for you. So here's the plan for today. I'm going to talk to you for about 30 minutes. And then I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to start off by making my case for building your network, why I think that's a good idea. I'm going to strive throughout this program to encourage you to take action, to make some calls, to get the ball rolling. That's really the change that I want to make in you as a result of this program. I want you, once you've made those calls, to end up having a great experience meeting someone or multiple people and getting your network heading in the right direction. And I want to help you to overcome whatever resistance there might be to the idea of building your network, to help you get through the anxiety that some people experience, to break through whatever stuff might be holding you back. I want to help you to do some things, to take some actions that result in you having fun. I really think you can enjoy this process and that you can make new friends, and that ultimately that's a good thing. These are people who who like you, who trust you, who you trust, who you spend time with. And you know, when I look at the big picture, beyond the law firm, beyond the business, beyond family, when you look at the really big picture, I think what you find is that this is a game and the rules are simple. And the rule is that the one who dies with the most relationships, with the most friends, with the most connections, that person wins. And so I want to give you some ideas today and motivate you to act so that you can win this game. You know, we hear it all the time. We hear stories on the radio, or we read articles, or we read books where people have been interviewed, often on their deathbed, and they ask them, you know, what's the most important thing? And over and over and over again, the answer to that is the relationships. That's what everybody sees as having been valuable and important in their lives when they look back on them. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about building more connections, more community, more meaning into your life, and building your network, which has the effect of building your business, is a big part of this, and a big part of what makes people who look back on successful lives feel like they've been successful. So let me give you a little backstory on this program before I jump into the substance. This program is something that came out of something that dates all the way back to January. At the Rosen Institute in January, we launched a program called the Marketing Accelerator. And I don't know, 80 maybe lawyers joined the Marketing Accelerator, and we worked together to grow their practices by doing some foundational work on their marketing messages. And then we moved into marketing tactics. And when we shifted into working together on the marketing tactics, we broke out into a number of different groups in our online community on Slack. And this program that I'm doing today is part of an ongoing conversation that we've been having in the speaking channel. It's a channel where people who came out of the accelerator agreed to work together on building their exposure for their practices through public speaking, whether that's in person at a Rotary Club or online in a webinar or wherever. And so in that channel, we agreed to work together, a small group of us, on putting on webinars. And my role in that was to jump in first and say, I'll do one, I'll demonstrate so that you have something to model how this is done. So for weeks now, we've been talking about how you promote and publicize and the technology of webinars and how you put the program together and all of that. And this is the result of that effort. Everybody in that channel has committed to doing a webinar. At least some of the folks in that channel have agreed to do webinars. And that's how I ended up doing this one. So this is a result of a group project inside the Institute. And so it's kind of killing multiple birds with one stone. We're giving you this information and helping you out, but we're also helping out a bunch of folks that wanted to do their own webinars. And by doing it together, we're actually getting it done. It's hard, I think, sometimes without a little bit of an external push, some accountability to follow through on stuff like that. And I will tell you, even among the small group of us that are doing this together, some of us have fallen by the wayside on the way. So those folks who have shown up today as part of that group, I want to just say to you, it's not too late to get back on the train and get your webinar done. So that's the backstory of how this came to be. Now, the program today, let's get going. I want to tell you that we'll save time for Q&A. We've got plenty of time for Q&A. So if you have questions, make note of them. I would encourage you to go ahead and put them in the Q&A box that you see on your screen. There's no time like the present. I don't want you to forget the questions. So feel free to put them in at any point. Ned will be going through them, keeping up with them, and he will read them out to me when we get to that portion of the program. And if you need to leave, if I'm not interesting enough for you or you have other commitments or whatever, don't feel like you've got to stick around. I know when you go to webinars, there's like some special offer at the end or a discount code. I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to give you a discount on. So you go if you need to go, or if you get tired of listening to me. Don't feel like you've got to stick to the end. I will not be offended if you've got to get out of here. So don't stress about that. Okay, so let's dig into the meat of this stuff we want to talk about today. Networking, building your professional network. It is the highest return on investment marketing activity that you can do. It's the most efficient, effective, productive way to spend your marketing time and money. When you build a network, people come to you or refer to you, and they already trust you. This is a great way to get clients. And the clients who come to you because they already trust you are quick to hire you. These are not the tire kickers who think about it and compare lawyers and prices. They hire you quickly and easily. There's not much, if any, resistance because they came with a recommendation and they trust you. They're willing to pay higher fees. They are clients who come to you at a lower marketing cost. You're not spending a fortune on advertising or some other marketing tactic. The sales process is easy. And like it or not, the process of getting referrals from a network is the oldest, most proven marketing approach there is. It just works. It has always worked, and I have no doubt that it will always work. So this is the big payoff in terms of a marketing tactic. Building your professional network simply works. But when I talk and think about building my network personally, it makes me anxious. Because for me, building a network, at least initially, meant going to Chamber of Commerce meetings or receptions, or going to Bar Association receptions and talking to people that I don't know. And I don't know about you, but I assume since you were attracted to the idea of networking without going to networking events, that maybe you feel at least some of what I feel. And I can so easily place myself in my imagination in one of these rooms where everybody is standing around talking and I don't know anybody and nobody is talking to me, nobody is coming up. So I've got to go talk to them if I'm going to build my network in that way. And I've got to like ease in sideways into a conversation and say something that, you know, breaks the ice. And everything about it just makes me, I mean, I can feel the sweat starting now just thinking about it. It is for me an awkward and uncomfortable situation. And when I have forced myself to do it because I felt like I had to, I've had the weirdest, most unpleasant experiences. I remember being stuck in a corner, trapped by a guy that sold printing for businesses, you know, letterhead and business cards and all that. And literally for 90 minutes, not having the capacity to artfully extract myself from this conversation. And it just feels like that sort of thing happened to me over and over again. And then I tried other approaches like the BNI networking groups, and there are a gazillion of these types of things. I tried joining entrepreneur groups. Even if I was willing to do it and put up with my stress of going to their events, it always felt like an incredibly scattershot approach. I practiced family law. The odds of me bumping into somebody at a networking event who was going to either come to me for a divorce or be able to refer to me for a divorce was slim. I knew who could refer to me. Other lawyers had people asking them about divorce lawyers, mental health people, clergy, some accountants. They had people asking about referrals to divorce lawyers. But the people that I met at the BNI meetings didn't. I mean, the dry cleaner, you know, that was in the BNI group, he doesn't know a lot of people getting a divorce. It was an incredibly inefficient, unproductive way to generate business for me. Now, if you love going to things like that, if you're you're thrilled with entrepreneur events or Chamber of Commerce events or BNI or any of those groups, then go for it. Because if it's working for you and you're happy with it, then I think that's awesome. But for me, it was not comfortable and it was not something I wanted to do. And so I just ultimately found myself not doing it. So if networking is the highest return on investment marketing tactic that you can employ, but if also these events are inefficient and awkward and uncomfortable, then how do you go about building a network of people who can refer good quality cases to you? What do you do? What I think you do is you do what I like to call laser networking. I invented that term. No one seems to have, it has not caught on, but if it ever does, just remember I invented laser networking, I think. And what I mean by that is that you pick the people that you think can refer to you and you get to know them. Instead of this shotgun crapshoot approach, you actually zoom in, laser in on the people that you think can refer to you, and you build a relationship with those people. And so you pick the best people, the people that you think would be high value targets for you, and you contact them. You invite them to lunch or coffee, and you build a relationship. I'm going to elaborate on that, but that's the idea. You pick the best people that you think have a good chance of being able to refer to you in your practice area. You connect with them, and then you build the relationship. You let it grow. And for me, that was a good plan. It worked out. The way that I always looked at it was that I knew what I needed to do in terms of revenues, and I knew that I could assign a value to each case, each client that hired me, and I backstep planned from the numbers that I came up with. And what I concluded, and I think in my practice area, these numbers work. In your practice area, you'll have to use different numbers. But what I concluded was that if I could get 20 good people who would refer to me every other month, so 6 times a year, that I could build $1 million practice very quickly. And in fact, it worked out that way. And ultimately, the average fee was higher than what I calculated in the beginning. But 20 referral sources, 6 referrals a year, 5 of those folks would hire me because they already trusted me when they came in the door. I assigned a value of $10,000 per case. And if you do the math, 20 times 5 times 10 is $1 million a year. And so I backstep planned those numbers and came up with a number of relationships that I needed to build. Obviously, you've got to do the math for you and figure out how many relationships you need to build. But I concluded that if there were 20 people I really needed to have that level of connection with, that level of trust, that I needed to go to lunch or coffee with those 20 people 4 times a year. So I needed to do that 80 times a year, 20 times 4, 80. And I concluded that I needed to stay in touch with them a little more often by emailing or touching base in social media now. Didn't used to have that, but I needed to have a way to stay in touch. And I figured I needed to stay in touch with them 8 times a year other than our 4 lunches or coffees. So 8 times 20, 160 emails or touches in some way other than lunch or coffee. I very much turned this into a game for me. And I concluded that I could still have plenty of lunches with friends and family and by myself, and plenty of time to go hang out in Starbucks without my referral sources if I would commit to these 80 lunches and coffees a year. And it really is as simple as that intellectually. The problem is that it's emotionally much more complex than that for whatever reason. Something stops us from executing on that simple math problem. I've coached a lot of people through this, and I will tell you that I've watched a lot of lawyers who understand the plan, who create a list of who they'd like to target. They've got pretty good people on their list. And because of some emotion, whether it's fear or anxiety or not wanting to be rejected in some way, they don't execute on the plan. They don't make the phone calls that they need to make. It's not maybe polite to say that to a bunch of lawyers that we get afraid, that we are fearful of calling other people about making referrals. But I have watched it in person. I have sat across the desk from people and asked them to make the phone calls. I have coached people through this, and they are very hesitant. It just is what it is. And so as we talk today, I want to give you some ideas on how to overcome that fear, to get the ball rolling so that the fear is not really a factor as you move forward. But be aware of it. It's coming. And here's what I'd like to suggest to you if you're facing the fear. We all need, as professionals, to build our businesses. There's nothing about that that isn't normal and usual for everybody, no matter what we do. In every practice area and in every profession, folks need to grow their businesses. When you call someone about lunch, they're in the same boat you're in. You're asking to meet them, but you know what? They need to meet you. Everybody needs to meet more people. Everybody, the game is the one who dies with the most friends wins, the most relationships wins. They're in the same exact situation that you're in. And so ask yourself this question. If they called you and were a friendly voice on the other end of the phone and invited you to go out to lunch, would you be bothered by that? And the fact of the matter is, when folks call and invite me to lunch, well, I'm pretty excited to be invited to lunch. It doesn't happen that often, I think some of us start to imagine, oh, this person I want to call, they're too busy for me. They're invited to lunch all the time. Well, you may assume I'm busy, but I'm not too busy to go to lunch with you. I've always had time in my professional life to go to lunch with anybody if they called and asked. And that's true of the bulk of professionals. There are some people that don't want to have lunch with you. Okay. But there are lots of people who do. And most of us on this call, we're pretty excited if we get to meet somebody new and they want to take us out to lunch. That's a pretty good day, or coffee, or whatever it may be. So when that call comes from you, they're looking at this as a call they didn't have to make. They get to meet someone new, build a new relationship, and you did all the emotional work. You took the risk. In that scenario, everybody wins. And that has very much been the reaction that I have had when I have made these calls. So who do you target when you're working on doing this? Well, I will tell you it varies by practice area, but lawyers are consistently a good referral source in most practice areas. And so I would encourage you to add lawyers to your list. But then look at professionals in other areas. I found clergy were really good for me. CPAs were really good for me. Oddly, gynecologists proved really good for us in terms of building relationships. You just need to think it through and look at where your referrals are coming from now and think about who else out there has connection to the people that you need to have referred to your practice, and backstep plan for that. Target the people who are easy for you to call at first so that you'll build up momentum while you're comfortable, and then take it from there, up the game. Go to people that make you a little anxious to call. You may be surprised at how many people say yes. Again, that has been my experience. I don't think you can aim too high. Look at people that have connections to lots of people who have lots of opportunities to refer. Make your list and start going through it. And we'll talk more in a minute about how to do that. Invite them to lunch or to coffee. You need a time to sit down alone with them and start building the relationship. This relationship that you're starting to build, if it's going to be fruitful, is going to last a long time. So you really want to get to know them. You want to research them to the best of your ability before lunch. Look at Google, look at LinkedIn, look at Facebook, do a little bit of stalking online so you know more about them. Take some notes. Remember, this is going to be a long-term relationship. So invest a little bit of energy into getting to know them. And then when you're at lunch or coffee with this person, what you want to do is ask questions. Don't talk. Listen. Be the world's best listener. A lot of lawyers, when we talk about this, say to me, well, how should I present what I do in my practice area? What should I say? Just listen. Just listen. When the lunch is over and the person leaves the restaurant and says to themselves, I really liked that lawyer, what has happened is that you have not said much. You have asked lots of questions and they got to talk the whole time. And the more you listen, the more they talk, the more they like you. That just works. I know that doesn't necessarily make sense, because at the end of that lunch, they don't really know anything about you except that you let them talk the whole time and they love you. So listen hard. Listen harder than you've ever listened. Practice being silent and just nodding and using a word or two to acknowledge that you're hearing what's being said. And listen for opportunities to keep the dialogue going, to build the connection, to build the relationship. You'll have your chance to talk down the road. What we're trying to do here now is build connection and build trust so that we can move this relationship to the next level. Now, something I want to knock out of our list of concerns really quickly right here, right now. A lot of lawyers are, we're transactional. We think that if somebody's going to refer to us, we need to be able to refer to them. And we use that thought as an excuse to not build many relationships. Don't do that. Don't believe that. Referrals are not transactional. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now because we don't have a lot of time. I actually have an article coming out in the Friday File in a few weeks or a month on this very point. But don't believe that every referral needs a reciprocal referral. There are lots of ways that I talk about in the article, or that I'll talk about more if anybody asks, to exchange value, to make that relationship equal without referring back and forth. Now, I'm covering this on a fairly high level, but here's the deal with meeting these people. I've convinced a lot of lawyers to make the calls, to go to lunch or coffee, to ask a lot of questions, to listen really hard. And they leave that lunch with the other person liking them, trusting them, and at least at this preliminary stage, contemplating making referrals to them. The problem is that right after that lunch, that person you just had lunch with does something. What they do is they forget about you. Now, I know you are a memorable person and nobody would ever forget about you, but let me tell you, people do. They get back from lunch, there are a pile of phone messages they need to return, there's a crisis or whatever, and life goes on and they do not remember you. Don't expect them to. It's not reasonable to expect them to. I've hung out the last 4 days with a husband and wife and kid, and I will tell you, I can't remember the husband's name right now if you ask me. It's hard to remember people when you're back to your own life. So what do you do about that? You follow up. You keep a list of these people. You take notes after your lunch or coffee so you remember the details about these people, and you follow up with them. You send them an email about something they mentioned. You saw an article, or you see something funny and you forward it over to them. Or they said something about their kids, thinking about sending their kid to this school, and you see something interesting about the school and you send a comment about that. You must follow up. And the only way you're going to do that is if you do it very systematically. You need to put it on your calendar or in a contact management system, something, because if you're not religious about it, it's going to fall through the cracks. And so the schedule I suggest is lunch, a contact in 30 days, another contact in 60 days, and another lunch in 90 days, and then repeat. Every 30 days, you're either sending an email or a touch in some way. And at the 90-day cycles, you're doing lunches. So 4 lunches a year, 8 reminders of your name throughout the year. In addition to that, you've got to do the follow-up or your effort is wasted. And I meet a lot of lawyers who say, yeah, I did a lot of lunches, but I haven't talked to those people in a year or two. They forgot about you. They do not remember. They will not refer if they don't remember you. Those follow-ups, those connections, those coffees and lunches over time, they build into real relationships, into real conversations that build a real friendship. We reveal things about ourselves. They reveal things about themselves. We stop just talking to each other about how great we are, and we start talking about what's not so great, what we're worried about, what our fears are, and what our concerns are. And things that have happened that we're nervous about. And eventually, you really do fall into a long-term relationship with these people. It just happens if you're following up and you're staying in touch. The combination of the frequency and the time that you're spending together, along with these conversations, well, that's the magic recipe for building friendship. It happens. The next thing you know, you really like this person. You really feel a strong connection. And if you don't, then find somebody else and change who's in that list of 20 folks or whatever number it is that you're using, because there are lots of people out there that can refer to you. And if this isn't fun, if it's not turning into relationships that you're enjoying, well, then find some other folks. You don't need to keep working on a relationship with somebody that you don't feel a connection to. So here's the action plan. Here is what I suggest to you that you do, like today or over this weekend. Make a list. Put more people on that list than you think you need. You will have done your math. You'll know how many you're shooting for. Make a list of people you want to target. Your list will expand and contract a little over time. You may not have the perfect list at the outset. That's okay. Some of your people that you meet will suggest other people. You'll discover as you start thinking about things, people you hadn't thought of before. But make a list now. Then on Monday of next week, first thing in the morning, call 3 people on your list. If you do it first thing, the odds are really good that you're going to get voicemail. Leave a message. Don't make it a long, complicated message about Lee Rosen said, call you. I want to take you to lunch. I'm building my network. Just say, hey, this is Jane. I'm an attorney. Please call me back at this number. Boom, done. They will call you back. Now, the nice thing about that is that when they call you back, you didn't have to make 2 calls. The ball is rolling. Things are happening. They're calling you. Make sure you're going to be around and answer the phone and then invite them to lunch. Some folks will never call you back. That's okay. That's why we made the list longer than it needed to be. But we're talking about calling folks you don't know in many instances. Some of them you will know. They'll be the low-hanging fruit. I'm pushing you to call people you don't know. I'm pushing you to do the scary thing. And because right now, when you're just starting, you've got energy for this. So suck it up, find the courage, call some of these tough people and leave a voicemail. The next thing you know, they are calling you back. And just do it. You don't expect yourself to do it right. Don't expect it to be perfect. Learn by doing. The hard part of this is not the doing of it. It's that resistance that we talked about earlier. Just leave the voicemails in the morning and let those calls come back and schedule the lunches and schedule the coffees. Most people are going to say yes. You really will be surprised. I always am when I get that kind of positive response. So I would ask you to make a promise to me. More importantly, I would ask you to make a promise to yourself to make those 3 calls on Monday morning. The making of those 3 calls shifts the burden from you. You've done your work and you've got the voicemails in all likelihood. And now all you got to do is wait for the callback. And what happens is that it goes better than you imagine. The lunches get scheduled. The lunches will happen soon. It will be more fun than you thought. You'll actually have a good time. It will be a positive experience. Crazy things will happen. Like the person at lunch will look at you and say, I just had this person call me and I've been trying to figure out who to refer them to for this. Or I've got this client that I'd really like you to talk to. Or you'll just have a great time at lunch sharing experiences and stories and listening to interesting stories. So you will have more fun than you think, but it all starts with those 3 calls on Monday morning. If you will do that, this will start to happen. If you don't do that, if you spend a lot of energy thinking about your list, coming up with a plan, screwing around with, I need the perfect software to use to track all of this or whatever it may be, it's not going to happen. For the folks that make those calls on Monday morning, you're on your way. For the folks that don't make that call on Monday morning, you better do something to shock yourself into action, because otherwise you're going to keep finding reasons why you don't need to do it. All right, that's the gist of the message. And you hear what I'm asking you to do to make that promise to yourself. I want to go ahead and answer questions because we don't have a lot of time today. Ned, do we have some that I need to answer?
Yeah, let's get to a couple of these questions. First one up is, does email work for getting people to meet instead of phone calls?
I get this question constantly because people don't, because the phone call feels, there's more resistance to the idea of making a phone call because you might get somebody on the phone, and the email feels sort of easier, and it's so easy to ignore an email, especially if you write the email out and say, this is what I need. I'm trying to invite you to lunch. And even if the lawyer wants to go to lunch with you, they've got a lot of things on their plate. There's a lot of other emails. You're not a paying client. You're not freaking out, and somebody is freaking out all the time. And so the emails don't get the attention that the voice call or the voicemail gets. And so I really encourage you. I almost feel like this is offensive, but the email is kind of the chicken approach. Don't be a chicken. Just make the phone call. I know it's scary, but be brave. Make that call. Take the risk. It will pay off for you. I can't hear you, Ned. There's no voice.
Well, my fault. What about when one is new to a practice area or has very little track record? Would it make the other person nervous to refer to the person in that situation? Understandably, there is no expectation initially that anybody will jump ship to refer right away.
I don't think it'll make anybody nervous to refer to you, but they're only going to refer things to you that they feel are appropriate. Lawyers don't want to negligently refer to someone, so they're going to refer matters that they feel fall into your area of competence. But I would not stress about it. And and I will tell you that there are lots of reasons that lawyers make referrals, and it's not always a careful evaluating, objective process. Sometimes we just need to get something off our plate. So this is the kind of question that keeps people from taking action. It's one of those stories we tell ourselves about why this is not a good idea for us. It is a good idea for us. Let the lawyer decide whether it's appropriate to make a referral to you. You don't need to worry about them. They'll do what they think is right.
I'm a law student. Should I wait until I've passed the bar to start making networking connections?
No. Go for it. Build the relationships. The fact of the matter is, and we've got a bunch of lawyers on this call, and each of us can think about how we feel about this. But most of us are pretty excited to meet a law student and tell them everything about how this is going to work out and what they need to do. I mean, you remember law school, the 2Ls couldn't wait to be telling the 1Ls how it was going to be done. And the 3Ls love to tell everybody how it works and give advice. I mean, we are not a group of people who are without opinions and a willingness to share them. So if you are a law student getting ready to graduate, this is the perfect time to be out there getting to know people and building that network. And you see, when you ask people for input and advice, you're listening. And that's what I'm suggesting you spend your energy at lunches and coffee doing, is not talking, just listening. And I've never met a lawyer that didn't want to tell a law student what they should do next. We love that stuff.
What about staying in touch with long distance contacts? I have formed a few very good relationships with a few lawyers, and I am stuck sometimes for keeping in touch with them because I don't know how. Should I just ask what's going on with them, what they're working on?
Yeah. Most of my relationships now are long distance. If I'm in a place where I know people, then I make sure to see them. I'm going to Raleigh next Tuesday, and I will have nothing but lunches and dinners with old friends, people that I've received referrals from for a very long time. In every city I go to, I meet up with people that I know in one way or another to build those relationships. But the bulk of the people that I know, I don't see in person because it just doesn't work out with our schedule moving around the world. And so you want to do exactly what you suggested, but you can do more. You can really amp it up so that you maintain at least this schedule of having some touch 12 times a year, once a month. Social media is magical for that today. Everybody is on whatever, Facebook or you name it. And so that's a great way to stay in touch. But email's another good way. Phone calls, obviously, another great way. What I have found, and it's why most of you are here today, is that I have built a relationship and stay in touch with a lot of people by writing articles and sharing information and advice and ideas that I have. And a lot of you appreciate that. So I keep doing it. And it is a way to remind you each week that I exist. So blogging is another great way to stay in touch. But yeah, you want to just keep reaching out and keep building those relationships. And, we talk about this idea that friendship forms with proximity and frequency of being together and disclosure, sort of sharing ideas of what's going on with you and all of that. If you're not going to be in the same room with any frequency, you can amp up the others. If you don't have proximity, you could have frequency and you could have more disclosure. So you could amp up disclosure and amp up frequency, even if proximity is not going to be a part of the formula. It's an algebra problem. I didn't do very well in algebra, but you can use the math there to make the relationship even stronger. And all of us know people that live across the country or across the world that we feel close to. Look at those relationships and replicate them. See what's working for you and keeping that relationship strong, and do more of it with other people.
How do I figure out who to put on the list?
You know, so here's the deal. There are people in your community that everybody knows. Those people get a lot of questions about who to use for dentist, doctor, lawyer, accountant, whatever it may be. Some writers will refer to those folks as like super connectors. You'll hear terms like that. Those are the greatest people to get to know. Those are the sort of, if you have a super connector or two in your network is going to be much stronger. So those are, for a lot of us, kind of the toughest people to feel comfortable reaching out to. It's funny because those are also the people who are most thrilled to be invited and are willing to get to know you, because that's who they are. They are people that love to hang out with other people. So if you had a bunch of super connectors, wonderful. They're sort of at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum is that person at law school that you still keep in touch with. You don't really see very often, but they'd be really easy to call and set up lunch with, and you could make something happen. A lot of folks, that's who needs to be on their list, because if it's not easy and comfortable, they're just not going to do it. And then everybody else falls somewhere in between. So I want you to be comfortable enough to go after the super connectors. But if you're not, then I want you to go after that person you haven't seen in a year from law school, but who'd be happy to hear from you and go to lunch.
I feel a little weird about setting up a second lunch after I've already met and spoken with the contact. How do I get around this feeling?
So it's just you. If it was a fun lunch, and if you were listening, then it was a fun lunch, because, fundamentally our favorite topic is, us. I mean, I would love to spend more time talking to you about me today, right? And that's just real life. And so the other person is happy to go to lunch with you again. They do not have enough friends. There are stats on, it's a little different for women, but for men, a guy over the age of 40, do you know how many new friends he will make for the rest of his life? None. Zero. Loneliness in the United States is at epidemic levels. I mean, it creates depression, substance abuse, on and on. This other person would love for you to invite them to lunch again. And because you have notes and you kept up with what went on at the last lunch, the conversation is not starting from scratch. It's like, oh, how's your mom doing? I know you were worried about this or that, or did you get that thing settled, that case that you were hoping to end up with a big judgment, or what? You come in ready with more questions, and you're curious because you're a curious person. You want to know what happened with respect to the stories that you had been hearing about at the last lunch. So everybody wins. We project our anxiety, our fear, our resistance onto the situation, and you don't need that. They want to go to lunch with you. They want to make a new relationship. They want to have more friends. They had a great time with you last time because you listened. Now, you know what? If they thought you were just, a horrible human being, and you invite them to lunch again, they're just not going to go to lunch with you. Nobody loses. You're not going to have to sit on a miserable lunch. They said no, or they didn't return your call, or whatever it may be. It's not going to happen much because of all the things I just said. But inviting them to lunch will not result in a lunch if they don't want to go. And they're going to want to go.
If I think about it in my heart of hearts, I would say, no, I don't want to go to lunch with someone that called me. I don't like going to lunch with strangers. Does this mean this type of marketing just isn't for me?
No, just do it. It's more fun than you think. It is the resistance talking. we are so good at rationalizing our fears and deciding that the things that make us anxious are a good thing, are the right thing, are justifiable. If you go to lunch with the person who calls and invites you, and they listen to you and let you talk, you're going to walk away from that lunch saying, I really like that person. You just are. But everything about social stuff it pushes our resistance buttons. So please just do it. You're not here by accident. You saw the title of this program and you thought, yeah, I need to build my network. It's important to you. And if you do it this way, you're going to have fun with it. I know it does not feel that way, but if you will just make those 3 phone calls on Monday, this will go well. And then you start that loop of positive feedback where good things happen and more good things happen. And so you keep dialing and you decide, you know what, every morning, first thing in the morning, I'm going to make 3 phone calls. I have a Rosen Institute member who went crazy with this. I mean, I don't know if she was on medication or what, but the next thing you know, she still has 3 parties a month, 3 different networking groups she formed. It's really just a big party in a bar that's near her office, 3 times a month with 3 different groups. She was to the point where she was doing 8 or more lunches and coffees every single week. I mean, she is just a networking machine, and she has built a very successful practice because of it. When you start doing it, it really is addictive when you see how well it goes, how much fun it is, and how much money it generates.
If I get the call back and the person wants to know why I want to meet, what do I say?
You say that you are getting to know more people, that you're curious about their practice, that you'd like to learn more about what they're up to, that you're building your practice and you'd love to take them to lunch if they're up for it. You just be honest and straightforward. You know, you're not interested in making a bait and switch. You keep it short. You sound like a pleasant person. You make it clear that you're a lawyer because even in today's world, we still have a certain status and people are interested in getting to know us. We're movers and shakers and leaders in our communities. We're pretty successful people. And the answer is generally going to be yes. Just be straightforward and say, this is what I'm doing. And recognize that the person on the other end of the phone has done and does the exact same thing and is dealing with the exact same issues as you are. They need to meet more people and build their practice.
Can you share some thoughts on group lunches with friends that refer to you or are likely to or are in a position to, as opposed to having to call strangers and have lunch with them?
So do whatever makes you happy. I have no argument with anything that feels good to you. Go for it. What I am suggesting is a very simple approach that will work for you. But if you are more comfortable with a variation on the theme, then I'm good with it. But be careful that your variation on the theme isn't just the resistance and that you're like, oh, I'm going to put these group lunches together. This will happen. I'll make this happen. But now we can't get everybody together. We can't get it organized. Too complicated. Everybody's schedules or whatever it is. If it doesn't happen, then it's pointless. So my approach is about keeping it simple and easy. It's calling one person. It's arranging one meeting. It really is pretty straightforward and effective. The more complicated this gets, the less likely it is to happen.
Can you recommend any daily practices to overcome the resistance you described to reaching out to contacts, such as how to make a habit of contacting people and blocking out all the other distractions and tasks?
Yeah. Decide you want to do it. I mean, there is no magic. Like I had to lose about 60 or 70 pounds when I was 37 years old because I had a heart attack and I had to get my weight down. And I've always joked about I would write a diet book, except that it would be really short, because the advice would be like, eat less food. So I'm obviously, not the most, I'm not the nicest advisor on this front. I don't have gentle, easygoing approaches to this. If you will just call the people and they will call you back. And the next thing you know, you will end up at lunch. And recognize that, you don't need a lot of energy or effort to make something a habit if you really want and or need to do it. And if you want to grow your business, and if this is a tactic that makes sense for you, and it probably is, then you just need to do it. And you don't need any advice from me about like how to pick the kids up from school. If it's 2:30, they get picked up and your job that day is to pick them up. Well, at 2:30, you're there. We didn't have to like ease you through that and come up with a way to get comfortable with it. You just do it, whether it's comfortable or not, and whether you've got a deadline or not, and whether people are calling you or not. You walk out the door, you get in the car, you drive to the school, you pick them up. Because that's the thing that's got to get done. When you decide this is that important to you, when you actually want to do it, you will do it. I can't make you do something you don't want to do. Only you can make yourself decide you're going to do it.
I called someone and they told me that they don't eat lunch. How would you deal with that?
Well, it's possible that is just their clever approach to avoiding lunch with you. But I will tell you that I had a referral source, a great referral source, who did not go out to lunch. He ate lunch, but he did it very quickly. And we had a ritual every 90 days of me going to Subway, and I knew his order. I had it in the notes. I knew what to order for him at Subway. I would pick it up along with a bag of baked Lay's potato chips. I remember quite vividly this turkey sandwich. And he's a psychologist, so maybe that explains this. But we would go, I would take the sandwiches, I would be at his office at noon. We would sit down in his office, open up our sandwiches. By about 12:25, we were done. I was back in the car and on my way. I could schedule 2 lunches that day. He would eat the Subway sandwich, and we had a good chat. And he never slowed down. He's still referring to the law firm. He was a great referral source for many, many years. So explore options, but you can go to coffee, you can bring lunch, or maybe you just move on to somebody else. You don't have to figure every single person out. There are a lot of people out there for you to have lunch with.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. Any closing remarks here, Lee?
I was a young lawyer years ago, and I was in a deposition asking questions, as you do. And a paralegal came in, which is kind of unusual, in a deposition for someone on your staff to interrupt. And she came in and interrupted me, and she had an urgent phone call that I needed to go take. And my mother was on the line crying and told me that my father had died. And I went back into the deposition and postponed it. And within 2 hours was on a plane to Miami, and my brother came down, and we did everything that we could to be supportive and to take care of her, and planned the funeral, which happened very quickly. And big room full of people that showed up for my father's funeral. He had a big network. He was a person who was very involved in the community and all sorts of activities over the years. He had run for judge once years ago. He volunteered at places. He handled ACLU cases. He went to all the sporting events. He always had friends inviting him, or if he had season tickets, he would invite people. He'd go to the opera and the theater and the ballet. And my parents were out all the time. His network was big. He had a group of people he had breakfast with every weekday morning in a restaurant called Corky's. They all hung out there. And this funeral was packed with people from every one of those groups, those networks, the places he had volunteered, the people from breakfast, and on and on. It was a big group of folks. And I want you to think about your funeral. Maybe not the best way to end this discussion, but I want you to think about who's coming, and will it be filled with lots of people that you were close to? Remember, I said at the outset, this is a game where the one who dies with the most friends wins. And what we're talking about here today will increase the number of friends that you have, the number of relationships, the number of connections that you have. And it will enhance the quality of your life when you look back on it. You will have had deeper, better, more relationships with more people. And so you will not only win with respect to your business, but your family wins, you economically you win. You will make other people's lives richer and better by building these connections. This approach works for having a better life. So on Monday morning, go make those 3 phone calls. Get it done. I hope that I've persuaded you. Listen, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this stuff with me. If there's ever anything I can do for you, don't hesitate. If you want to have lunch, let's book it. Good luck to you. Don't be hesitant to ask more questions of me as we go down the road. But I wish you the best of luck with this, and I hope you'll make those calls on Monday. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.